Sean Callery, in the last 12 years, there's only been one ceremony at the Emmys where you were not up for at least one award, and that was the year that 24 took off due to the writer's strike. You were nominated every season, and you've been nominated every year since it ended for three other series. So how do you respond to this recognition?
One is I didn't know that statistic, thank you for giving me that info. I didn't know that. No, it's just getting nominated getting nominated for an Emmy is basically a shout out from your peers. The peers vote for you, they select you, as it were, and then when you get to the final voting, it's also selected by your peer group. It's a completely peer group involved process. So it's very humbling, and it means a lot. I've never ever what's the word I'm looking for? It's never taken for granted at all, and you're extraordinarily humble when you receive a nomination of any kind.
All right. Well, did you know that 24 is the only show that's lasted longer than three seasons that's been nominated every single year for its music?
How do you know? No. How did you? Is this research you did? Because that's very cool. Wow. That's no. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Thank you. That's good to know. I mean, look, the show was extraordinarily well made, and when I joined the show, I was certainly untested, and the executive producer of the show, Joel Surnow, had to really make his case to Fox Television that I would deliver on doing the job, and he probably at times had more confidence in me than I did, but it's been an extraordinary ride, and I've made a lot of really great lifelong friendships from the show, and the fact that it's even back 4 years later is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy.
So at the Emmys, achievements in music are determined differently than other categories where instead of just going off a straight popular vote, there are screening committees.
That's right.
So I believe that if you submit, then you have to serve on one. Is that true?
That's right. If you submit in a category, for example, an underscore or main title, you review other categories, which would include music direction and long-form miniseries. And as a matter of fact, I am in the middle of viewing music direction as we speak for that because the ballots are due at the end of this week, and that's it's a lot of great programming.
Yeah. So what do you look for when you're judging a category?
Well, if you were to see the worksheet, they actually designed it pretty well because there's several different there's a criteria. One is about how applicable the music is working. How successful it is working in the style of the content that's being written, the quality of the writing. There's I forget the exact sort of specifics, but it's designed to sort of really get you thinking in an unbiased way, and you just sort of select based on your how you receive when you're watching the picture and how well it's working in this net. So it's a very hard job actually, because there's a lot of very great music in, for example, the miniseries category, which I've had to do a couple of years. So many different kinds of projects with very different kinds of storytelling and very different kinds of scores. So, but in the end, the fundamental criteria is when you're watching it is is the score serving the telling of the story in an efficient, elegant, and musical, moving way.
So do you know what episode of Homeland you submitted, and how did you choose that one?
I did submit an episode. I submitted the last episode, which was of season 3, 312, and it was a very emotional episode. It was an incredible episode, in which well, for those who might be watching who haven't seen the season, let's just say that there's a profound ending of sorts. There's a lot of closure and the opening of doorways to new possibilities. There's a very nail-biting kind of sequence at the opening of the act that I thought was fun to work on. The show was very unique in that it didn't have a recap. Almost every episode of Homeland has a recap, and this didn't. It started right on the drama, and then at the very end of the episode, there's this wonderful sequence with Claire Danes, who plays Carrie Matheson, who honors a character by drawing a star on a wall, and it's just a silent moment where just the music and the visuals. It was. I just liked the episode. I mean, Homeland is a very minimal score. It's a very it's not a wall-to-wall kind of a score, but it's a project and a show that I really love.
So in the last year, I think you've worked on the new 24, Homeland, Elementary, Bones, and how do you manage so many series?
In the time since I began 24 in 2001, which gives you an idea as to how old I am, what's happening is shows are now, content is sort of being produced year round. It used to be that you worked on shows between September and May, and then there was this hiatus where production on shows was not as active. And now what's happening, as you are, and your audience probably knows, is if you're watching Orange is the New Black, or if you're watching House of Cards, is the viewing that's happening on streaming media and so forth. And the episodes, the seasons are shorter on pay channels and Netflix, and for Netflix original series and things of that nature. So there's like 10, 11, 12 episodes, as opposed to, in 24's case, a 24-episode season. So the pacing of the seasons is kind of it's like checkerboarded a little bit. There are some overlaps, and but they have to be managed. They just have to be managed. That's just a fact of life.
Do you approach each episode like entirely new?
I mean, I don't know how many times we've seen Jack Bauer enter a building with a gun drawn and trying to stop a bad guy from doing something, but he somehow brings, as an actor, Kiefer Sutherland, he brings such a freshness to the performance. And last night, I think, was our 200th airing of an episode of 24, which is extraordinary. And the fact that it still comes off the screen as being so fresh, each episode sort of has that kind of it has that kind of freshness, from the writers to the directors, and you simply visit each episode anew. You obviously have a bit of a language, a vernacular of how the show sounds and how it paces and so forth, but you do aspire to give it its own unique little mark. Its own, each episode has its own energy and flow. So the music has the responsibility of honoring that. Even though, as I said, Kiefer's put out a lot of, Jack has put out a lot of, he's wiped out a lot of people, and we've seen it a lot of times. But it's still compelling. Homeland's more of a political, it's more of a political thriller, and a lot of the action, if you will, a lot of the action happens in the silences, the pauses. It's almost a documentary kind of real natural world storytelling, where it's almost, when they shoot that show, like you're spying on a conversation. It's that kind of execution of storytelling. Whereas 24 is much more adrenaline rushed, and it's infused. The music is almost omnipresent. Whereas in Homeland, the music has a much more discrete place in the overall storytelling experience. But the music, no less, the music has the same responsibility of serving the story, in however much or how little the score is. I got a really great lesson from Stephen Nathan, who was the exec producer of Bones when I first began the series, and it was that Bones actually deals with like crimes, and sometimes you see some rather grisly images on that series, and yet the score has a sort of lightness to it, yeah. And it's amazing that you could look at a sort of decaying, maggot-infested corpse and be hearing light piano or pizzicato or bells and stuff, and not be thrown off by it. It's and when there's humor in the show, it's not like you're musically putting your elbow into a friend and saying, "Ha, isn't that funny?" It's not like that. It's more just letting the comedy sort of happen naturally. And playing it, and not really playing the moment. It's just sort of, it's a lighter environment. You're creating a lighter environment with the music, and the humor is just manifesting within that environment.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Thanks for talking to me. This is a fun thing. I love that clock behind you, by the way. What is that? Is that your home? Is that a clock? It's like a Back to the Future clock tower. What is that?